10,000 typhoons!
It's where the unicorn sank!
This means...
Hey guys, welcome back to yet another marvelous video. Have you ever noticed how some shows from back in the day were way ahead of their time? They just didn't get the love or the budget they really deserved. Some of these shows had some great ideas and stories that were way deeper than anyone expected. And then they vanished after a season or two, leaving us all hanging. So today, I want to talk about 8 comic-based shows that absolutely deserve a second shot. Sit back and enjoy as we dive in. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Maxx. Sam Kieth created a comic called The Maxx back in 1993, and it was something new. He had about 35 issues, and he gave readers a bizarre purple-skinned figure who lived 2 lives at once. In the real world, Maxx was nothing more than a vagrant, a guy literally sleeping in a cardboard box. But in the alternate dream realm called the Outback, he was the sworn protector of the Leopard Queen. And here is the twist. The Leopard Queen was really Julie Winters, a social worker in the normal world who kept bailing Maxx out of jail without realizing how their realities were actually tangled up. MTV was interested in this and, in 1995, turned it into a 13-episode animated series. It was short-lived, yeah, but unforgettable. Years later, the comics were reprinted as The Maxx, maximized. And even Batman got pulled into Keith's weird little universe in a crossover back in 2018. That is how far-reaching this cult favorite became. At the heart of it though, the story was heavy. The villain, Mr. Gone, was not just some random bad guy. Gone was a predator. He knew how to get into people's heads. With Julie, it was more personal. He had a strange telepathic connection to her, and he would keep bothering her with phone calls. Maxx tried to step in to keep her safe, but nothing about it was simple. He had an army of creepy things called the Is. These were small, sharp-toothed creatures that could pop up in the middle of an alley or slip into the outback like they belonged there. Whenever Maxx fought them, the battles felt strange, almost dreamlike. Eventually, he also made her face whatever she spent years trying to bury. It is during this time that it is revealed that he has been around her since childhood as Uncle Artie, telling her tales about Australia that would go on to shape the look and feel of her outback. What made the Maxx special was not just the purple suit or the weird dream monsters. It was the way it tackled heavy stuff like trauma and identity. But you could also see its limits. Tight budget, not so great tech, and the kind of animation that could not fully bring Keith's strange world to life. Now, imagine that same story with today's animation tools. Smooth, layered visuals, dreamscapes that actually feel alive, characters that move and emote the way Keith probably pictured them in his head. It would hit way harder, especially since audiences are already hooked on mature animated shows like Arcane and Invincible. A reboot would be a chance to tell this story the way it always should have been told. Old fans would finally get the Maxx they always wanted, and new viewers would discover a world that is weird and unforgettable.
Super Team Extraordinaire, Freakazoid, Freakazoid.
Freakazoid. If you were around in the mid-90s, you might remember Freakazoid. It followed the wild adventures of a teen superhero who was just completely unpredictable. His civilian identity was Dexter Douglas, a regular high school geek at Harry Connick Jr. High. But once he shouted, "Freak out!" he became Freakazoid, a crazy, hyperactive hero patrolling Washington, D.C., and often the rest of the world. So how did a regular kid become a superhero? Well, it all started with a weird computer bug and a very curious cat named Mr. Chubbykins. However, somehow, Dexter hit a secret key sequence and then smashed the delete key, and just like that, Freakazoid was born. And no, he can't fly for real, but he will run around with his arms stretched out making whooshing noises, pretending he can. Freakazoid had all sorts of abilities: super strength, crazy speed, and access to every bit of knowledge on the internet. Sometimes, he would even go full telekinetic out of anger or turn into electricity to zip across the globe in a second. And his base, the Freakalair, was like a fun parody of the Batcave and a mad scientist lab, all built by his mute butler, Ingmar. Oh, and he had weird weaknesses too, like a weird fear of poo gas and graphite bars charged with negative ions. The show's humor was very unpredictable. Episodes would start in Washington, D.C., and then suddenly take him to Tibet, outer space, or a random side adventure that had nothing to do with the main plot. Between crime fighting and chaos, Dexter would chill in his brain's own Freakazoid, reflecting on life or watching reruns of Rat Patrol. Honestly, Freakazoid is one of those shows that could really shine if it got a proper reboot. The original was already a mix of superhero action and completely absurd comedy. It did not hold back on being ridiculous, and that is exactly what made it so memorable.
We'll just get a head count for the trip. Everybody who's going, raise their hands.
The Boondocks. The next on our list is The Boondocks. The show followed the Freeman family, 10-year-old Huey, his 8-year-old brother Riley, and their grandfather Robert as they moved from Chicago's South Side to the predominantly white suburb of Woodcrest. This was not your typical family sitcom. This was social commentary disguised as Saturday morning cartoons, and it was absolutely brilliant. What made The Boondocks so special was not just its gorgeous animation, it was how fearlessly the show tackled topics that most networks would not touch with a 10-foot pole: race relations, police brutality, celebrity culture, politics. Nothing was off limits. Take Huey Freeman for example. This 10-year-old kid was questioning everything around him and calling out hypocrisy whenever he saw it happening. Meanwhile, his brother Riley was completely enamored with gangster culture, creating this perfect dynamic that let the show explore different perspectives within the black community itself. The show ran from 2005 to 2014, and during those 9 years, it became a cultural phenomenon. They also had very interesting episodes like The Trial of R. Kelly and Return of the King, where they imagined Martin Luther King Jr. coming back in modern times, which were not just entertaining, they were eye-opening. Here's the thing though, everything the Boondocks was criticizing back then has gotten 10 times worse. Social media, celebrity worship, political chaos. We are living in peak Boondocks territory right now. With all the social and political discourse happening today, imagine what McGruder would do with a reboot. The original series built this massive, dedicated fan base, and there is a whole new generation discovering it on streaming platforms who never got to experience it when it first aired. A comeback of the show would start exactly the kind of conversations that we all need to be having right now.
You and your stories, swindling swine, that's what I'm thinking.
Darkwing Duck. Alright, so let me tell you about Darkwing Duck, this absolute gem that ran from 1991 to 1992 on the Disney afternoon and Saturday mornings on ABC. We got 91 episodes of pure superhero comedy gold before it ended way too soon. So here's the premise. You have Drake Mallard, an ordinary suburban duck living a totally normal life with his adopted daughter, Gosalyn. But when trouble strikes in St. Canard, he transforms into Darkwing Duck, complete with purple cape, gas gun, and the most over-the-top introductions you have ever heard. The guy has a massive ego and constantly craves fame and attention, but deep down, he really does want to do good and be a decent dad. Most episodes basically pit these two sides against each other, and thankfully, his better nature usually wins out. Every single episode was packed with references to classic pulp heroes like The Shadow, Batman, Doc Savage, you name it. Darkwing himself was this brilliant parody of all those golden age superheroes, right down to his flashy costume and dramatic entrances. Even the city of St. Canard was a direct joke on Gotham City. The thing is, this show was doing superhero parody perfectly back when most people were taking comics completely seriously. Now we are living in this age where audiences absolutely love shows that poke fun at superhero tropes. The Boys, Invincible, all that stuff. Darkwing Duck was 30 years ahead of the curve, and honestly, with Disney Plus looking for nostalgic content, a modern version could absolutely capitalize on that.
Shall pass.
I sure hope so, Sam. It's been at least 5 minutes since my last brush with death, and I'm getting...
Sam and Maxx, Freelance Police. Okay, the next on our list is The Adventures of Sam and Maxx, Freelance Police. The show started in October 1997 on Fox Kids, and it was something special. It was based on Steve Purcell's comic series, and it followed this incredible duo of vigilante private investigators. You have Sam, who is a laid-back anthropomorphic dog in a suit and fedora, and Maxx, a rabbit who is basically pure chaotic energy. These two would take on the weirdest cases you could imagine, tracking down criminals and solving mysteries that no sane person would ever encounter. The setup was kinda perfect. The two work as freelance police, getting their assignments from this mysterious commissioner whom they have literally never met face to face. These were not your typical kind of cases. We're talking about adventures that would take them to the moon, Mount Olympus, the center of the earth, and so on. Between official assignments, they would somehow find time for completely random stuff, like time traveling just for kicks, or hunting for Bigfoot on a Tuesday afternoon. What made the show even better were these holiday episodes that felt genuinely heartfelt despite all the chaos. Picture Sam and Maxx visiting a prison on Christmas or delivering an artificial heart on Valentine's Day. Somehow, they managed to make these scenarios both touching and absolutely hilarious at the same time. Now, here's where things get interesting. The original Sam and Maxx comics and video games were definitely aimed at older audiences. They had some edgy humor, a little bit of swearing, and pretty intense violence. But for the TV show, they toned everything down for kids without losing the signature weirdness that made the characters so great. Instead of graphic violence, you would get these cartoonish forms of mayhem that were somehow even funnier. The episodes themselves were usually about 10 minutes long, and Fox Kids would typically air them in pairs, which worked. The first and final episodes got the full 20-minute treatment, which gave them room to really develop some epic storylines. And here is what makes this cancellation even more frustrating. The show was actually doing well. Critics loved it, and kids loved it. Looking back now, it is clear the show was kind of ahead of its time. The animation industry was not quite ready for something this weird and wonderful, but audiences definitely were. That is probably why the characters have managed to survive and thrive in video games and comics long after the TV show. A dog and rabbit solving supernatural crimes is fun, and the show gained a cult following because of how odd and quirky it was. Having a reboot of this would really embrace the eccentric humor and make this better with modern animation techniques. Also, with shows like Rick and Morty and Adventure Time proving that a surreal animated series can find its own huge audience, Sam and Maxx could easily tap into that same niche of people craving something genuinely weird and different.
Gang.
You sure are good, Marshall.
Okay, boys, you try it.
Cowboys of Moo Mesa. Next up, we have Cowboys of Moo Mesa. This show premiered on September 12, 1992, as part of ABC's Saturday morning lineup, and ran for 2 seasons with 13 episodes each. It was created by Ryan Brown, who you might know from his work on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Back in the late 1800s, this irradiated comet, they called it a cowmet, crashed into the western plains and created this massive mesa that is miles high and covered in clouds. Everything that got trapped on top of this mesa got cowmetized by the comet's light and basically evolved into these anthropomorphic cow people living in a bovine version of the Wild West. These cow folks only had old tales and stories to go on for how the Wild West life was supposed to work, so they had to improvise and fill in all the blanks themselves. You end up with this community that is trying really hard to be authentic cowboys and outlaws, but they are getting half the details wrong in the most entertaining ways possible. The main story followed Marshall Moo Montana and his group of peacekeepers called the Cowboys, and Cow stood for Code of the West. Moo Montana was joined by the Dakota Dude and the Colorado Kid, and these three had their hands completely full trying to keep justice. The problem was that the official law enforcement in Cowtown was totally corrupt. You had Mayor Oscar Baloney and Sheriff Terrible, who were basically useless when it came to dealing with all the outlaw gangs causing trouble. What made this show so memorable was how it took every single Western trope you could think of and ran it through this completely absurd cow filter. It was like someone took a serious Western and decided to make it the most ridiculous thing possible while still keeping all the adventure and excitement that made Westerns fun in the first place. Here's why Wild West Cowboys deserve to have a reboot. Mixing Western themes with anthropomorphic characters was great, and it had a setting that nobody else has really worked with since then. Even though it only had 2 seasons, the show has a fan base that still remembers it fondly decades later. A modern reboot could take that same thing and make it with today's animation techniques. Imagine how incredible that mesa could look with current technology. The timing is actually perfect too, because there is this huge surge in interest around anthropomorphic characters in animation, and Western themes keep making comebacks in different forms. A show that combines both of those elements could easily capture a much wider audience than the original ever had the chance to reach.
An old sea tale. Sources say the treasure hunt's full speed ahead. Tintin and
The Adventures of Tintin. The next on our list is The Adventures of Tintin cartoon. It was a full-on international project. A French studio called Ellipse Programme teamed up with Canada's Nelvana to bring Hergé's iconic comics to life on screen. Between 1991 and 1992, they made 39 half-hour episodes across 3 seasons. Stéphane Bernasconi directed the whole thing on the French side, while Peter Hideki handled things for the Canadian team. Funny enough, Hideki was actually the main director, but because of how the co-production deal worked, he could not be officially credited. Behind the scenes, it was backed by the Hergé Foundation itself, and this kept everything tied closely to the source material. One of the coolest parts is that they did not just adapt the comics loosely, they practically lifted frames straight out of Hergé's books and put them on screen. It gave the whole series a really faithful to the comics vibe. In the comics, which Hergé had drawn over decades, his style evolved a lot with time. The show kept everything in a consistent look. Critics loved the loyalty to the comics, and fans noticed too. And in true Hergé fashion, he even popped up for cameos in the show, kind of like a Stan Lee wink or an Alfred Hitchcock walk by. Sometimes, he was just a background guy in the street, but if you knew how to look for him, you would catch him. Here is why The Adventures of Tintin absolutely deserves to make a comeback. The concept is timeless. You have this young reporter and his incredibly loyal dog Snowy traveling all over the world, getting into these amazing adventures that feel both exciting and educational at the same time. The original animated series was really well received by audiences and critics, but it had such a limited run that it never got the chance to explore everything the source material had to offer fully. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 1987 to 1996. If you grew up in the late 80s or early 90s, there's a good chance you had some experience with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, whether it was the toys, the cereal, or the TV show itself. The cartoon, produced by Fred Wolf Films, took the comics by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird and turned them into something more fun and family-friendly. The show started off as a 5-part miniseries in December and was such a hit that it became a full-time series starting in October 1988, running all the way to November 1996. It was not just a TV show, it was a cultural explosion. Suddenly, you couldn't walk into a toy store without seeing action figures of Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo, the 4 pizza-loving, sewer-dwelling turtles trained in ninjutsu by Master Splinter, their rat sensei. There were plush toys, video games, lunchboxes, and even breakfast cereal. The turtles were everywhere. By 1990, the show was airing daily on over 125 stations. Set in New York City, the series followed the turtles as they battled villains like the Shredder, Krang, and a rotating cast of mutated baddies while trying to stay hidden from the world above their sewer home. Each turtle had their own personality. Leo was the leader, Donnie the tech genius, Raph the hothead, and Mikey the party dude, which made their team dynamics just as fun as the fight scenes. And while the show took the edge off from the comic's darker tone, it still gave fans action, adventure, and plenty of laughs. Even decades later, the turtles never really went away. They showed up in crossovers like the 2009 movie Turtles Forever, in Nickelodeon's 2012 series, and have also made appearances in video games, movies, and comics. What made the 87 TMNT show such a hit was how it was a mix of action and comedy. One moment, the turtles were goofing around, cracking jokes, or shoving slices of pizza into their mouths. Next, they were leaping into full-on martial arts battles, taking down Shredder, Krang, or whatever new villain had popped up that week. Nothing else on TV at the time did that, and it's no wonder the show blew up into this massive franchise. Honestly, the original series still feels like it deserves a proper reboot. Sure, there have been other TMNT shows since, but none of them quite work the same way the 87 series did. The potential is enormous. TMNT never really goes away. The fans are still insanely passionate, and new generations keep discovering the turtles for the first time. Marvelous verdict. Well, with that guys, we have come to the end of yet another fun video. Now, I want to hear more from you. Have you watched any of these shows before? Which of these would you like a reboot if you could pick? And is there any show not on this list that you think deserves a reboot? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed watching this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.